My name is Gabrielle Hosein. I'm the head of the Institute's Gender and Development Studies, and we'd like to welcome you to our public forum on the Marriage Acts in Trinidad and Tobago. Our theme today is Too Young to Wed, and as you all probably know, our event is being done to commemorate the International Day of the Rights of the Girl Child. And some of the basic issues that girl children continue to face around the world, which have to do with a right to learn, a right to lead, a right to decide, a right to equality, and in general have to do with improving the capacity of girls to renegotiate the terms in which they're growing up in order to create greater conditions of their own choosing. Today we have a range of perspectives that I think are important for you to hear. And that's because the marriage laws as they currently exist are up for amendment. And the question really at this point is, what are the best amendments to be made to the marriage laws of Trinidad and Tobago in the interests of minors, and in particular girls. I'll be introducing our panelists in a moment, and as well Ms. Folade and Mutota, who's the director of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, and one of the persons who's been leading the coalition to end child marriage in Trinidad and Tobago will also welcome you. But I do want to say a few things, just to provide some context. One is that this is the second forum on the marriage laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular the issue of child marriage that the Institute has done. The first was in November of 2012, and all of the presentations from that forum 4 years ago are on our IGDS YouTube page. So those are also available for you to see how people's engagements have been changing over the last few years. So if you understand that this is not an issue that's only just come up today. And in fact, Brenda Gopeesingh, representing the Hindu Women's Organization, in talking about her work, will also be highlighting that this was work that they have been doing since 2011 as well. So we have to understand this as part of a long struggle in which women's organizations have been involved. I want to just raise some issues for you to keep in mind during the presentation, and also in terms of the kinds of comments that you can bring to the discussion. One is the question of children. There's a debate currently where, for example, the theme by feminists is that child marriage should be ended. Organizations led, for example, by Mr. Satmaraj, have argued that the issue is not one of child marriage. In fact, he would argue that no children have been married under the Hindu Marriage Act. He would argue instead that teenagers have been married, and that there is therefore what he recast as teenage marriage as an issue. And I think we need to take this into account, because we need to understand that the way issues are framed is also a reflection of the kinds of voices that are existing. I would like to suggest that in thinking about this, we also think about not so much child or teen, those are also cultural and shifting contexts, but the question of minors, right? How does what happens to minors in our society become an issue? And what are the issues, and how do our laws address those? But I do want to raise the fact that the question of children, what is a child, who is a child, is up for conversation. Tied to that, of course, is the question of consent. There are multiple notions of the age at which children can consent. Previously, the law said the age of consent was 16. The Children's Act places it at 18. The Family Planning Association will tell you that not just in cases of early forced sex, but also in cases of consensual sexual activity amongst teenagers, we have to think about what does it mean to empower teenagers to make those choices when they are making choices that are the best for their health, their lives, their safety, their future. But the question of consent is also a very sticky one. when it comes to sexual relations of teenagers, say, for example, between 16 and 18. So these are part of the debates. I'm not saying these are my perspectives. I'm saying these are part of the debates going on in the field right now. Our panelists will be talking about the implications of child marriage. And Sarah Nabi, who is one of our presenters and is not able to come today, her research, her recently completed MSc project, interviewed past child brides who are all now adult women over 40, and found that in the few cases of interviews that she had done, one of the things that those women spoke about was the difficulty of negotiating power relationships as young girls, and indeed greater vulnerability to violence. And I think that we need to put on the table, in particular, girls' continuing difficulties in negotiating power in their relationships and in their intimate partnerships at whatever age they begin. Finally, I do want to put on the table questions of class, which is that child marriages generally are not occurring amongst privileged classes of people. They're generally occurring amongst girls who are not in positions where people are investing in them educationally or academically in the same ways that more privileged parents need. We need to take into account the conditions that girls live in which they end up in situations of early marriage. When Khadija Sananan speaks, she will likely be documenting some of the statistics. But what you should know is that this is an issue that has affected hundreds of girls over the past decade, so not few in number, if you think about how their lives may have been affected. I also want to put on the table the question of teenage pregnancy, because in some quarters, marriage is seen as a solution to teenage pregnancy. And what I'm highlighting to you are all the complexities, indeed, the confusions that form part of the public debate, which we have to sort through if we are actually going to use these spaces to strategize for effective change. For those of you that don't know, there are actually 4 marriage acts in Trinidad and Tobago: the Hindu Marriage Act, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, the Orisha Marriage Act, and the States Marriage Act of 1923. Girls under 16 have been married under all those acts. The Muslim Marriage Act, the Hindu Marriage Act, as well as the States Marriage Act. So this is not just a Hindu and Muslim issue. It is in fact a national issue, reflecting girls' early induction into sexual relations in which negotiating power can become an issue. I also want to put on the table, finally, I'm using Sarah Nabi's time to raise some of the issues that she would have faced on her MSc. I also want to put on the table the question of girlhood in particular, which is that in general these early marriages are happening to girls, not boys, and they're happening to girls who are being married to adult men, primarily. And that in itself is also an issue that we need to take very seriously in this conversation. It's a problem in the acts themselves as we're discussing the question of amendments. It's a problem that there's a higher minimum age of eligibility for males over females in all 4 acts. This means that boys are given more chronological time to develop before being allowed to marry. It can also be seen as a misogynistic stance towards girls' lives, as the state offers them less time for nurturing, self-development, and overall growth. Moreover, regarding parental consent, in the marriage of minors, preference is given to paternal consent over maternal consent. Indeed, in some cases, the male legal guardian is acknowledged over the mother in cases where the biological father is unavailable. The state's inferior recognition of mothers highlights the enactment of patriarchal values in legislation regarding guardianship. as I close, I want to again suggest that our goal should be to understand the multiple discourses being offered at this time, which provide a very complex environment in which we're trying to seek amendments to the marriage laws. That discursive terrain is also shaped not just by class, but also by religion and by race. And there are perceptions in represented by a Hindu or Muslim patriarchal view that Hindu and Muslim cultural traditions are under attack. And in so doing, there's a circulating of wagons which never works for the lives, sexualities, and bodies of girls and women. But that is indeed how these things are received. I was speaking with a lawyer about this the other night. I said, we signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child. He said, nobody cares about conventions in Trinidad and Tobago. He said, what's your philosophical argument? I said that girls are being married to adult men in numbers that speak against their ability to negotiate these relationships. He said, that may be valid, but do you understand the history of the Hindu and Muslim Marriage Acts and how long they have been fought for? Indeed, this discussion about marriage, the Marriage Acts, has been taking place since 1905, with discussions about the age for marriage being documented from as early as 1924 in the Hindu and Muslim community. So this is a very long conversation at work that's been given cultural and religious overtones which have significance for how different groups respond, fortunately or unfortunately, in society. Having laid that kind of terrain for the context within which feminist voices are seeking to be heard, I would like to ask you all to help us as feminist voices and feminist groups engaging in this debate to understand how we can negotiate this complex terrain in which the question of children and children's rights, consent, race, religion, and tradition, and indeed concerns about protecting girls, quote-unquote protecting girls' respectability as opposed to protecting their rights come into play. And I hope that these considerations come into your comments in the forum in the question and answer period. First, I would like to ask Ms. Folade Mutota to provide a welcome on behalf of the coalition with whom we're partnering in this event, as well as Family Planning Association of the Hindu Women's Organization, who will have a chance to speak later.